Sunday morning, November 17th, 2013. The town of Washington, Illinois. Quiet, peaceful, ordinary. Families sipping coffee in warm kitchens. Kids still in pajamas, cartoons flickering on TV screens. Church bells ringing softly in the distance. Leafless trees swaying gently under a gray November sky. This is the story of the most evil tornado ever recorded in Illinois. A monster that arrived when it was least expected, in a month when tornadoes are supposed to sleep. A storm that would carve a 46-mile scar across the heartland, with winds approaching 190 miles per hour. Stay with me. 10:50 a.m., Central Standard Time. But on the other side of the atmosphere, something ancient and powerful was organizing. November, but not this year. Meteorologists saw it coming. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk for severe weather across Illinois and Indiana. Tornado watches were posted. But here's the cruel irony. People in Washington had heard warnings before, dozens of times, and nothing ever happened. They had no idea the monster was already forming. 2.5 miles east of North Pekin, in Tazewell County, the funnel touched down, and then it began to grow. By 11:02 a.m., the tornado crossed Interstate 74. Brick homes north of the interstate had their roofs ripped clean off. Not shingles, entire roofs. The walls stood, but everything above vanished. Witnesses described it as if a giant hand had simply reached down and peeled the top off like a tin can. But the tornado wasn't done, not even close. 11:05 a.m. Imagine this. You're in your living room. Maybe you're folding laundry. Maybe you're watching TV. The sirens are going off outside, but you've heard them before. You think, it'll pass. It always does. The walls start to shake. The air pressure drops so fast your ears pop. You hear it. That sound everyone talks about, but nobody truly understands until they hear it themselves. Not like a train, not like a jet engine. Like the earth itself is screaming. Homes, well-built, brick homes with solid foundations, were leveled. Not damaged, not destroyed, leveled. Reduced to piles of splintered wood, shattered glass, twisted metal. Entire families huddled in basements, praying, crying, holding each other as the world above them disintegrated. But the tornado kept moving, kept growing. This is where the monster reached its peak. The tornado was now a half-mile wide, and the winds hit 190 miles per hour. On Mackenzie Street, multiple well-built homes were swept completely off their foundations. Not collapsed, not blown apart, swept away. The concrete slabs were left bare, polished clean by the debris-laden winds. Investigators later found pieces of those homes scattered across fields miles away. One pickup truck was found embedded in the side of a house 3 blocks away. Another car was discovered in a field, upside down, a quarter mile from where it had been parked. 3 people died in Washington that day. 3 souls who didn't make it to shelter in time, or whose shelter simply wasn't enough. But here's the thing that still haunts the survivors. The speed. 15 minutes to go from just another Sunday to my entire life is gone. The tornado exited Washington, moving northeast into rural Woodford County. For another 37 minutes. Farmsteads obliterated, barns reduced to kindling, grain silos toppled like dominoes, livestock killed, scattered across fields, roads blocked by debris, power lines down, entire communities cut off from the outside world. The monster was gone. Silence. That's what survivors remember most. After the roar, after the chaos, after the wind, silence. No birds. No cars, no voices, just nothing. Emergency crews from across Illinois and neighboring states mobilized immediately. Fire trucks, ambulances, search and rescue teams. The Illinois National Guard was activated. The Red Cross set up shelters. Entire neighborhoods. Gone. Streets that had been lined with homes, trees, mailboxes. Now just empty lots covered in debris. It looked like a war zone, like a bomb had gone off. The numbers started coming in. That's almost $1 billion from one tornado, in 1 hour, And then, winter arrived. Imagine that. You've just lost your home. Everything you own is scattered across 3 counties. And now, you're standing in the rubble, in the freezing cold, watching snow cover the wreckage. But normalcy was a long way off. So, why? To understand that, we need to talk about the science. In spring, these conditions are common. The Gulf of Mexico pumps warm, humid air northward. Cold fronts sweep down from Canada. The jet stream provides the wind shear. It's a perfect recipe. By mid-November, the atmosphere is usually too stable. The Gulf moisture is weaker. The jet stream is farther south. Tornadoes can still happen, but they're typically weak, short-lived, and isolated. On November 17, 2013, a powerful upper-level trough dug deep into the central United States. It pulled unseasonably warm air northward, with dew points in the 60s. That's spring-like moisture in November. IM45. At the same time, a strong jet stream provided intense wind shear, and a surface low-pressure system acted as the trigger, lifting that warm air and setting off explosive thunderstorm development. The result? A supercell thunderstorm with the structure and intensity you'd expect in late April or May, but happening in mid-November. Dr. Jim Angel, the Illinois state climatologist, later called it the most evil tornado ever recorded in Illinois for the month of November. Evil, that's a strong word. But when you consider the timing, the intensity, the destruction, it fits. Because this tornado didn't just break records, it shattered expectations. It struck when people were least prepared, when their guard was down, when they thought they were safe. And that's what makes it so terrifying. Let me give you some context. Since 1950, Illinois has recorded dozens of tornadoes in November, but most of them were weak. EF0 or EF1, brief touchdowns in open fields, minimal damage. Only a handful reached EF2 or EF3 intensity. And before November 17, 2013, no November tornado in Illinois had ever been rated EF4. This was the first, the strongest November tornado in Illinois history, and one of the strongest tornadoes ever recorded in the state, regardless of month. It ranks alongside the infamous Plainfield tornado of 1990, which killed 29 people, and the Tri-State tornado of 1925, which remains the deadliest tornado in U.S. history. But here's what makes the Washington tornado unique. It happened in November, when people weren't expecting it, when the calendar said, "You're safe," when the season was supposed to be over. And that's the lesson. That's the warning. Nature doesn't follow a calendar. In the days and weeks after the tornado, survivors began to share their stories. One man, a father of 3, described huddling in his basement with his family as the house above them disintegrated. "I held my kids and told them it would be okay," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But I didn't know if it would be. I didn't know if we'd make it." They did, but their home didn't. When they emerged from the basement, the house was gone. Just the foundation and a pile of debris. Another woman, a school teacher, was at home alone when the tornado hit. She ran to her bathroom, the only interior room without windows, and crouched in the bathtub. "I heard the walls cracking, the roof tearing off," she said. "I thought, this is it. This is how I die." But she survived. The bathroom walls held. Barely. And then there's the story of the Washington Community High School. The school was heavily damaged, with part of the roof torn off and walls collapsed. But it was a Sunday. No students were there. If the tornado had struck on a weekday, the death toll could have been catastrophic. Luck, timing, fate, call it what you want. But the fact that more people didn't die, it's almost a miracle. 11:47 a.m. The tornado dissipated, but its impact, its legacy, would last for years. In the immediate aftermath, the focus was on rescue and recovery, finding survivors, treating the injured, accounting for the missing. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the focus shifted to rebuilding. And that's where the real challenge began. Because how do you rebuild a town that's been erased? How do you restore a sense of normalcy when nothing is normal anymore? Insurance claims flooded in. FEMA arrived to assess the damage. Volunteers from across the country showed up to help clear debris, distribute supplies, offer support. But the process was slow, painfully slow. Winter made everything harder. Frozen ground, snow-covered rubble, limited daylight, and the emotional toll, the trauma, that doesn't just go away. Many families couldn't afford to rebuild. They took their insurance money and moved away, starting over somewhere else. Others stayed, determined to bring their town back. But the Washington they knew, the Washington they loved, was gone. Let's talk about what makes a tornado truly devastating. It's not just the wind speed. It's not just the size. It's the combination of factors, the intensity, the path length, the population density, and most importantly, the timing. The Washington tornado had all of these. 190-mile-per-hour winds, a half-mile wide funnel, 46 miles of continuous destruction, and it struck a populated area on a Sunday morning in November. That last part, that's the key. Because in November, people's guard is down. They're not thinking about tornadoes. They're thinking about Thanksgiving, about the holidays, about winter coming. Tornado season is over, or so they think. And that's exactly what made this tornado so evil. It exploited our assumptions, our complacency, our belief that we knew when we were safe. But here's the truth, and this is something every person needs to understand. Tornadoes don't care about calendars. They don't care about seasons. They don't care about our expectations. They only care about atmospheric conditions. And when those conditions align, watch out. Let me take you deeper into the meteorology, because understanding how this happened is crucial to understanding why it was so dangerous. On the morning of November the 17th, 2013, a powerful low-pressure system was moving across the central United States. This wasn't unusual. Low-pressure systems move through the Midwest all the time, especially in fall and winter. But this system was different. It was deep. The central pressure was unusually low, which meant stronger winds and more intense weather. And it was positioned perfectly to draw warm, moist air northward from the Gulf of Mexico. By mid-morning, surface temperatures across central Illinois had climbed into the 60s, again in November. Dew points, which measure moisture in the air, were in the upper 50s to low 60s. That's the kind of moisture you'd expect in May, not November. At the same time, a strong jet stream was screaming across the upper atmosphere at speeds exceeding 150 miles per hour. This created massive wind shear, winds changing dramatically with height, which is essential for supercell development and tornado formation. And then there was the trigger, a cold front, sweeping eastward, colliding with that warm, moist air. The warm air was forced upward violently, condensing, releasing energy, building towering thunderstorms. By 10:30 a.m., the Storm Prediction Center had issued a tornado watch for much of Illinois and Indiana. The ingredients were all there. The atmosphere was loaded. But here's the thing. Tornado watches are issued dozens of times every year in Illinois. Most of them result in nothing. Maybe some heavy rain, maybe some hail, but no tornadoes. So, when the watch was issued that Sunday morning, most people in Washington didn't think twice about it. Big mistake. 10:59 a.m. The supercell that would produce the Washington tornado had been tracked by radar for over an hour. Meteorologists at the National Weather Service office in Lincoln, Illinois, were watching it closely. They saw the classic supercell structure. The hook echo on radar, indicating rotation. The bounded weak echo region, showing the updraft. The velocity couplet, confirming strong rotation at mid-levels. And then, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A debris ball. On Doppler radar, a debris ball appears as a bright, tight signature of high reflectivity. It's not rain. It's not hail. It's debris. Pieces of homes, trees, cars, metal, wood, being lofted into the air by the tornado and detected by radar. When meteorologists see a debris ball, they know. There's a tornado on the ground, and it's violent. At 11:01 a.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Tazewell County. The warning was urgent. It used phrases like tornado emergency and life-threatening situation. But by then, it was almost too late. The tornado was already approaching Washington, and it was moving fast, northeast at 50 miles per hour. That gave people less than 10 minutes to take shelter. 10 minutes. Think about that. 10 minutes to gather your family, get to the basement, and pray. Some people made it, others didn't have time, and some didn't take the warning seriously, because they'd heard warnings before, and nothing ever happened until it did. 11:07 a.m., peak intensity, Trail Edge Subdivision, Mackenzie Street. This is where the tornado reached its maximum power, 190 miles per hour, high-end EF4. To put that in perspective, at 190 miles per hour, the wind pressure on a structure is over 90 pounds per square foot. That's like having a full-grown man standing on every square foot of your house. And then pushing. No residential structure can withstand that, not even close. Well-built homes, constructed to modern building codes with proper anchoring and reinforcement, swept away. The walls didn't just collapse, they disintegrated. The roofs didn't just blow off, they exploded into thousands of pieces, and the debris became projectiles. 2x4s moving at 190 miles per hour become spears. Roof shingles become blades. Bricks become bullets. One survivor describes seeing a piece of sheet metal, probably from a roof, slicing through the air and embedding itself in a tree trunk like a knife. Another saw a wooden plank driven through a concrete block wall. The power of the wind. It's almost incomprehensible. And the sound. Survivors say the sound is what haunts them most. Not just the roar, but the cracking, the snapping, the tearing, the sound of homes being ripped apart, of lives being destroyed. One woman said, it sounded like the world was ending, like God himself was angry. 11:10 a.m. The tornado exited Washington and continued northeast into rural areas. You might think, okay, the worst is over. It's in the countryside now, less damage. Wrong. The tornado remained violent for another 37 minutes. It tore through farmsteads, obliterating barns, silos, homes. It snapped high-voltage transmission towers, cutting power to thousands. It scoured fields, ripping up crops, topsoil, even pavement in some areas. One farm family, the Johnsons, watched from their basement as the tornado destroyed everything they'd built over 3 generations. The farmhouse, gone. The barn, gone. The equipment shed, gone. Tractors, combines, trucks, scattered across the fields like toys. When they emerged, the father, a man in his 60s who'd lived on that land his entire life, just stood there, silent, tears streaming down his face. His wife held him, and they both wept. Their livelihood, gone. Their heritage, gone. Their sense of security, shattered. And they weren't alone. Dozens of farms along the tornado's path suffered similar fates. But here's something most people don't realize. Rural areas often get less attention after disasters. The media focuses on towns and cities. The aid organizations focus on population centers. And farmers. Farmers are often left to fend for themselves. Many of them didn't have adequate insurance. Farming is a tough business, and insurance is expensive. So, when the tornado destroyed their equipment, their buildings, their crops, they had no way to recover. Some sold their land and moved away. Others took out loans they'd be paying off for decades. And a few just gave up. The tornado didn't just destroy buildings. It destroyed lives, dreams, futures. 11:47 a.m. 2 miles east-northeast of Long Point, in Livingston County, the tornado finally dissipated. 48 minutes on the ground. 46.2 miles of continuous path. Peak width of half a mile. Peak winds of 190 miles per hour. By any measure, a monster. But the story doesn't end there, because in the hours, days, and weeks that followed, the true scale of the disaster became clear. 3 fatalities, 125 injuries, over 1,000 homes damaged or destroyed, $935 million in damage. But those are just numbers. They don't capture the human cost. The families who lost loved ones. The children who lost their sense of safety. The elderly who lost their independence. The communities who lost their identity. Washington, Illinois was a tight-knit community. Everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where neighbors helped neighbors, where kids played in the streets, where Friday night football games brought the whole town together. The tornado didn't just destroy buildings. It tore apart the fabric of the community. In the days after the tornado, something remarkable happened. People came together, volunteers from across Illinois, from neighboring states, even from across the country, descended on Washington to help. They brought chainsaws, shovels, trucks. They brought food, water, clothing. They brought hope. Churches opened their doors as shelters. Schools became distribution centers. The local high school gymnasium, despite being damaged, became a command center for relief efforts. And the people of Washington, they didn't just sit back and wait for help. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Neighbors helped neighbors clear debris. Strangers became friends as they worked side by side. And slowly, the town began to heal. But healing takes time. And for many, the scars would never fully fade. Let's talk about the psychological impact of surviving a tornado. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is common among tornado survivors. The sudden violent nature of the event, the loss of control, the fear of death. It leaves deep psychological wounds. Many survivors reported nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety attacks whenever the sky turned dark or the wind picked up. Some couldn't sleep. Others couldn't eat. Children regressed, clinging to their parents, afraid to be alone. One mother described her 7-year-old daughter, who'd been outgoing and confident before the tornado, becoming withdrawn and fearful. "She won't go outside when it's cloudy," the mother said, her voice breaking. "She has panic attacks during thunderstorms. She's not the same child anymore." And it's not just children. Adults struggled too. One man, a construction worker who'd always prided himself on being tough, admitted he broke down crying every time he drove past the empty lot where his house used to stand. "I feel weak," he said, "like I should be able to handle this, but I can't. It's too much." The mental health toll of the Washington tornado. It's something that's often overlooked. We focus on the physical damage, the rebuilding, the dollars and cents, but the emotional damage, that's harder to measure, harder to fix, and for some, it never goes away. Now, let's address the big question. Could this have been prevented? The short answer is no. We can't prevent tornadoes. We don't have the technology to stop them or steer them away from populated areas. When atmospheric conditions align, tornadoes will form. But, and this is important, we can reduce the impact. The National Weather Service did its job. The tornado watch was issued hours in advance. The tornado warning was issued with minutes to spare. The sirens sounded. The alerts went out. But here's the problem. Warning fatigue. People in tornado-prone areas hear warnings all the time. Most of them result in nothing. So, over time, people become desensitized. They hear the sirens and think, "Oh, it's probably nothing. It'll pass." And 99 times out of 100, they're right. It is nothing. But that one time when it's not nothing, that's when people die. So, how do we fix this? Better communication. More specific warnings. Instead of issuing a tornado warning for an entire county, issue warnings for specific neighborhoods, specific streets. Use language that conveys urgency without causing panic. And education. Teaching people to take every warning seriously. Teaching them the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. Teaching them where to shelter and how to protect themselves. Because the technology exists. Doppler radar can detect tornadoes with incredible accuracy. Meteorologists can predict severe weather days in advance. The tools are there. But if people don't listen, if they don't act, the tools are useless. Let's talk about safe rooms. After the Washington tornado, there was a huge push for safe rooms in homes and public buildings. A safe room is a reinforced structure, usually made of concrete or steel, designed to withstand EF4 tornado winds. It's anchored to the foundation and has a reinforced door. When a tornado strikes, you go to the safe room and you're protected. FEMA offers grants to help homeowners and communities build safe rooms. And after Washington, many families took advantage of these grants. But here's the problem. Safe rooms are expensive. Even with grants, they can cost thousands of dollars. And for families who just lost everything in the tornado, who are struggling to rebuild, who are drowning in debt, a safe room is a luxury they can't afford. So, while some families installed safe rooms, many others didn't. They rebuilt their homes, but without the added protection. And now, every time the sky turns dark, they worry. What if it happens again? What if next time we're not so lucky? Because here's the thing. Tornadoes can strike the same place twice. It's rare, but it happens. And the people of Washington know that. They live with that fear every single day. November 17th, 2023, 10 years after the tornado, Washington, Illinois, held a memorial service. Survivors gathered at the site where the tornado had been most intense. They placed flowers, lit candles, shared stories. 3 names were read aloud. The 3 people who died. A moment of silence followed, and then the survivors spoke. One man, who'd lost his home but not his family, said, "We're stronger now. We've been through hell and we came out the other side. This town, this community, we're unbreakable." Another woman, who'd lost her sister in the tornado, said through tears, "I miss her every day, but I know she'd want us to keep going, to keep living, so that's what we do." And a young girl, who'd been just 7 years old when the tornado hit, now 17, said, "I don't remember much about that day, but I remember the fear, and I remember the love, how everyone came together, how we helped each other. That's what I'll carry with me forever. Washington strong." That became the town's motto, a reminder that they'd survived, that they'd rebuilt, that they were resilient. But the scars remain. Empty lots where homes once stood, new houses that don't quite match the old ones, trees that are too young, too small, replacing the giants that were lost, and the memories that won't fade. So, what have we learned from the Washington tornado? First, tornadoes don't follow a calendar. November tornadoes are rare, but they happen. And when they do, they can be just as violent as spring tornadoes. Second, warnings only work if people listen. We need to do a better job of communicating risk, of cutting through the noise, of making people understand when they're in danger. Third, building codes matter. Homes built to modern codes with proper anchoring and reinforcement fared better than older homes. Not well, but better. And in a tornado, better can mean the difference between life and death. Fourth, community matters. The people of Washington survived because they had each other. They leaned on each other, supported each other, rebuilt together. Without that sense of community, recovery would have been impossible. And fifth, we need to invest in preparedness, safe rooms, early warning systems, public shelters, education programs. These things cost money, but they save lives. And isn't that worth it? Let me tell you about one more survivor. A man named David. David was at home when the tornado hit. He heard the sirens, saw the sky turn green, and ran to his basement. He huddled under a workbench as the house above him was torn apart. When he emerged, his home was gone. His car was wrapped around a tree. His belongings were scattered across the neighborhood. But David was alive. In the weeks that followed, he struggled. He stayed with friends, then in a FEMA trailer. He filed insurance claims, dealt with contractors, navigated the bureaucracy of disaster recovery. It was exhausting, overwhelming. There were days he wanted to give up, to just walk away and start over somewhere else. But he didn't. He rebuilt. Not just his house, but his life. And today, 10 years later, David lives in a new home on the same lot where his old home stood. He installed a safe room in the basement. He keeps emergency supplies on hand, and every November 17th, he takes a moment to remember. I'm one of the lucky ones. He says, I survived. I rebuilt. But I'll never forget what it felt like to lose everything in an instant. And I'll never take anything for granted again. The Washington tornado was rated EF4 on the enhanced Fujita scale. That means estimated wind speeds of 166 to 200 miles per hour. But here's something most people don't know. The EF scale is based on damage, not actual wind speed, because we can't measure wind speed inside a tornado directly. Anemometers, the instruments that measure wind, get destroyed. So meteorologists survey the damage after the fact and estimate the wind speed based on what they see. Well-built homes swept off foundations, EF4 or EF5. Homes with roofs torn off but walls standing, EF2 or EF3. Trees snapped or uprooted. Depends on the tree and the soil. It's not an exact science, it's an educated guess. And in the case of the Washington tornado, the damage was so severe in some areas that meteorologists debated whether it should be rated EF5, but ultimately they settled on high-end EF4, 190-mile-per-hour winds. Just 10 miles per hour shy of EF5, 10 miles per hour. That's the difference between catastrophic and total annihilation. And honestly, to the people who lived through it, the distinction doesn't matter. EF4, EF5. It was all the same. It was hell. Here's a question that haunts meteorologists and emergency managers. Could the death toll have been higher? The answer is yes. Absolutely. The tornado struck on a Sunday. Many people were home, which meant they could take shelter. If it had struck on a weekday during school hours, the Washington Community High School would have been full of students. The damage to the school was severe. If kids had been there, the death toll could have been in the dozens. And the tornado struck in the morning. People were awake, alert. If it had struck at night, when people were asleep, when they couldn't see the funnel approaching, when they might not have heard the sirens, the death toll could have been catastrophic. So, in a twisted way, the timing was lucky. But that doesn't make it any less tragic. 3 people still died. 125 were injured. Thousands lost their homes. And the fear that it could happen again, at any time, that never goes away. Let me paint you a picture of what Washington looks like today. Drive through the town, and at first glance it looks normal. Houses, lawns, trees, people going about their lives. But look closer. The trees are younger, smaller. The houses are newer, with modern siding and fresh paint. And scattered throughout the town. Empty lots, overgrown with grass and weeds. Lots where homes once stood but were never rebuilt. The town's population has dropped. Some families moved away, unable or unwilling to rebuild. The property tax base, as I mentioned earlier, fell by 47%. That means less money for schools, for roads, for public services. The Washington Community High School was rebuilt, but it took years. Students attended classes in temporary buildings, in neighboring towns. Their education was disrupted. And the businesses, many small businesses never reopened. The owners couldn't afford to rebuild, or they lost their customer base, or they just didn't have the energy to start over. So, while Washington has recovered, it's not the same town it was before November the 17th, 2013. It's a town that's been changed, scarred, tested. But it's also a town that survived. Here's the thing about tornadoes that most people don't understand. They're random. 2 houses side by side. One is completely destroyed. The other is barely touched. Why? Sometimes it's the construction. Sometimes it's the angle of the wind. Sometimes it's just luck. One family in Washington watched from their basement as the tornado passed directly over their home. They heard the roar, felt the house shake, expected the worst. When they came upstairs, the house was still standing. Shingles missing, windows broken, but the structure was intact. They walked outside and looked across the street. Their neighbor's house, gone. Just a foundation and a pile of debris. Same tornado, same moment. 2 completely different outcomes. How do you process that? How do you reconcile the fact that you were spared while your neighbor lost everything? Survivor's guilt. It's real, and it's heavy. Many survivors struggled with it. Why me? Why did I survive when others didn't? What makes me so special? There's no good answer. It's just random, cruel, arbitrary, random. And that's what makes tornadoes so terrifying. Let's talk about the cost. $935 million. That's the official damage estimate for the Washington tornado. But that number doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't include the economic impact. Lost wages, lost business revenue, lost tax revenue, the ripple effects that spread through the community for years. It doesn't include the emotional cost, the therapy bills, the medication, the sleepless nights, the relationships that fell apart under the stress, the marriages that ended, the families that fractured, and it doesn't include the opportunity cost, the things people couldn't do because they were focused on rebuilding, the college funds that were drained, the retirements that were delayed, the dreams that were deferred. When you add all of that up, the true cost of the Washington tornado is incalculable. It's a cost that will be paid for generations. So, here we are. Over a decade later, the Washington tornado is a chapter in history now, a case study in meteorology textbooks, a data point in climate research. But for the people who lived through it, it's not history, it's memory, it's trauma, it's a part of who they are. And the question remains, will it happen again? The answer is yes, not necessarily in Washington, not necessarily in November, but somewhere, sometime, it will happen again. Because tornadoes are a part of life in the Midwest. They're a part of the climate, the geography, the reality of living in Tornado Alley. We can't stop them. We can't prevent them. But we can prepare. We can listen. We can learn. And we can remember. Remember the 3 people who died. Remember the 125 who were injured. Remember the thousands who lost their homes. Remember that nature doesn't follow a calendar, that tornadoes can strike in November just as easily as in May. Remember that warnings only work if we listen, that sirens only save lives if we take shelter. And remember that when disaster strikes, when everything is lost, when hope seems impossible, we have each other. Community, resilience, strength. That's what the Washington tornado taught us. That's the legacy. November the 17th, 2013. A quiet Sunday morning turned into a nightmare. A monster descended from the sky, carved a 46-mile scar across the heartland, and changed a town forever. 190-mile-per-hour winds, a half-mile wide funnel, 48 minutes of terror, 3 lives lost, 125 injured, nearly $1 billion in damage, but also survival, courage, hope. The people of Washington, Illinois faced nature's fury, and they endured. They rebuilt their homes, they rebuilt their lives, they rebuilt their community, and they sent a message to the world. We are Washington strong. The tornado may have taken their houses, their possessions, their sense of security, but it didn't take their spirit. And that's something no tornado can ever destroy. So, the next time you hear a tornado warning, listen. The next time the sky turns dark and the sirens sound, take shelter. Because the Washington tornado taught us one final crucial lesson. It can happen to you. It can happen anywhere. It can happen any time. And when it does, will you be ready?